Hey everyone, for the first time ever on the It's a Vibe podcast, I am so excited to announce that we have our very first guest. I did an interview with Ben Laing, who is an amazing human being. As soon as you hear him speak, you'll understand why. We are totally on the same page, which is why I wanted to share this conversation with all of you because I knew Ben would add a lot of value to the chat, and that he did. Thanks so much to everyone for listening. I'm so glad you're here, and I'm really, really excited to finally have a guest on this show, one of many, hopefully. So I really hope you enjoy this interview as much as I did. So here it is. Enjoy. Okay, so everyone, this is Ben. I met Ben a while ago, right when I started this page. We kind of clicked right away. So just to introduce you, Ben is a father, a husband, a family man, but also a businessman. I think you started in SEO and then kind of evolved into creating your page and helping people with their businesses through strategies that you learned. But you're also a personal development junkie, which I love. Totally into mindset and self-awareness, which I think is super important. Yeah, and you can see all the books. I was going to say the next thing is Ben has his own book club, which is really exciting. And you can tell Ben is somebody right away through Ben's page and even just our conversation. He's somebody that is creating such valuable content for his audience and really helping people make a difference in their life. Because with business, it's not just about business, it's like your whole being. You got to work on yourself if you want to help other people. And the way that you do your content, I like that you just posted this the other way, like document, don't just create. And I feel like you do that. Like you show up and you're sharing insights that you're learning along the way. And you're not just learning them for yourself, you're learning them to kind of give value to the world. And that's
Yeah,
something that I really appreciate about you. So thanks for chatting with me. I'm so glad we can have this conversation.
yeah, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad we finally made it happen as well.
I know, right? We've been talking about this forever, and it's one of those things I feel like it was 2022. Like this year feels different, so I'm excited that this is the year we got. And at the beginning, a good start to the year.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
So I wanted to ask you in terms of like your path, because that's something that I find super interesting because I know like for me, my story is something that I find so powerful. And what I've learned through business is that what connects us, especially emotionally, is our story. So I wanted to know kind of just your path to getting to where you are right now. Was it something
Mm.
gradual that was kind of like small steps, you're kind of in this world, or was it kind of all of a sudden? How did you get to this point?
Very good question. I had a massive conversation with someone till about 12:30 last night, so I'm so glad that happened last night just before this call today because it refreshed me on that path of how I got to where I am today. And I'll just talk about what I was explaining that phone call because that was exactly what I was explaining to and describing what made me so passionate about personal development, which I've been told from a lot of people that that's actually what makes me interesting to other people is my passion for reading and personal development and like you're saying, giving back. So my background goes way back. My dad's very entrepreneurial. He's always called himself unemployable. And we're very alike, actually. A lot of people tell us that we're quite alike. And he's always been a mentor figure for me. So from the very beginning, from the get-go, I've had going into my subconscious mind from very young age, an entrepreneurial, positive, and awake dad. So I've been very lucky and I've had a really good start with that. But on the other hand, um, I, I have I went into school with what was labelled as a learning difficulty, which is dyslexia, and that was on one hand I had my dad, a mentor figure, and I was very lucky and had a very sheltered life with my mum and dad, very supportive people, and I had my gran who I spent a lot of time with my grans, and she was a good figure for me as well in terms of just to be a kind, loving person. But then school, in my own personal experience, it wouldn't look like it was a bad experience to my mum or my dad or anyone around me. Everyone probably thought I had quite a good upbringing. But for me, my own sort of self-confidence and value of myself, like being able to, like I forgot how to love myself and things through school. So I used to kind of like beat myself up on like different things. And basically dyslexia in school and society kind of made me feel like I wasn't good enough and small and stupid. That was a limiting belief I had, labeled it as, through other people obviously calling me that, even indirectly, not directly all the time, but it signified that was what was wrong with me. And I always thought that there was something wrong with me because I didn't learn the way everyone else did. But I always go back to this quote of Albert Einstein's, who says if you were to judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, it would go about the rest of its life thinking it was stupid. And that was like one of the best quotes that got kind of like allowed me to use as an example to how I've felt for the whole time through school, and what's happening to other people in school are being put into that box and being told to learn a specific way. When I've just learned that when I came out of school, when I got a couple of jobs which I got fired from or lost or didn't manage through the probation period. So like the process from going into primary school, high school, going to college and getting jobs, I was fed up with studying. I was fed up with learning. My creativity was just kind of beat out of me, and my self-esteem was way low. So that was kind of, I had on one hand that at school and that experience, and going into jobs and not doing very well, and then on the other hand I had my positive dad and mentor figure. So I still had a bit of that from my dad, where I was still a confident person on one side, but I had these little liabilities that kind of came around with me, and they were always kind of like clouds that were always there. But I never really discussed it because I always had this sort of masculine upbringing as well. I have a bigger brother and my dad, and all my friends were guys. So there was only one girl in our primary school in our age group. So it was very masculine energy that I was brought up with, and we didn't really talk about vulnerability and stuff like our weaknesses or feminine energy at all, and how we're struggling. We just got on with it. It was a manly thing to do. And that took a while for me to start to actually address my real problems. And I just put them to the side, and eventually they come up. You can't suppress stuff for your whole life, so they eventually get you no matter what. So you've got to address them. What you resist
persists.
That's it, yeah. What you resist persists. And so that, like, I had these two sides of me, which was a very confident, wise person, and then I had this person who had self-esteem issues, and had some bad labels on myself that came from myself and others. And then it wasn't until I asked my dad one day, what book should I read? Because he had all these, like, kind of like what I've got now. He has these bookshelves and books everywhere. So he had basically his own home library, and on his PC he would always listen to courses and things, and I listened to the courses with him. And I listened to investing stuff when I was 15, or younger, like 10, with my dad. Wow. And my dad used to try and kind of force it on me and my brother, and I always found it interesting. And I seen a guy who was 35 and retired sitting by his poolside, and I was like, I want that. And I drew a picture of a castle. I grew up in a place called Auchtertool, which is a very small village, which there was a large castle just outside from us. And when I was doing one of these exercises in this course that I was doing with my dad at a very young age, at 12, I think, I drew a picture of a castle, which was one of my goals. And that's always been a vision and a goal And I think it's because I used to actually play in the gardens of that castle and get chased by the gardeners. We weren't meant to be in there. And then I decided one day that I want to own that castle, just for the sake of the dream of being able to like come from there and do that. As an inspiration, as an inspirational story. So like you're saying, going back to what you said about, I learn and I do things not just for myself, but like I want to do it to inspire others and to teach others things. So I came from like sort of like a lot of hurt and some negative background, and even like rock bottom in terms of my self-confidence. But I also had a lot of like good positive figures in my life and knowledge and wisdom. So I asked my dad one day, I can't remember what motivated me to do it, but I think I had a business mentor. I started my own business. I lost my job. I decided never to get a job again. And I decided to start a web design business because I built a couple of websites for my dad and learned some skills that way. And that's actually, again, massively influenced by my dad, I think, is why I ended up in entrepreneurship very early. And that was age probably 17. I was building websites and doing search engine optimization, which is getting websites to the top of Google for my dad. And I ended up doing it for one of my dad's friends who was a roofer. And I got paid £300 for it. And that was quite a lot of money at that time for me, so because I didn't have any overheads or anything. So that sparked something. And just around at the time when I lost my job, I actually had a holiday booked to Los Angeles. I went ahead and did it anyway, but I was completely broke because I knew I wasn't coming back home to a job. And at that moment before I left for that holiday, I says to myself and to my girlfriend at the time, Gemma, that I'm never going to work for someone ever again. And I haven't. Kind of the same attitude as my dad, the unemployable attitude that I'm not meant to work for someone. I realised that. And that's what happened. I started a web design business and started doing that and getting recommended and referred and just building it as I went. And I asked my dad around that time, because my business mentor through a government scheme, he was mentoring me for free through the government. And he was a really good mentor. I still speak to him 10 years later and to tell him about my success from when he actually helped me. And he's still kind of like ahead of me and helping me today. So that's really inspiring to have him in my life and to have had that. I'm so lucky. But he told me I need to read a book on marketing because I started a marketing business, but I had never read a book on marketing at that time. So it's quite ironic, quite funny. But I knew how to get leads through Google, but I didn't really understand marketing at that time. So that inspired me. For some reason, things like that when I've got such a disadvantage or I'm so far behind, something in me like makes me really curious and goes, I want to master that. I don't just want to read a book on marketing. I'm going to master the art of marketing altogether. So that kind of led me down that route of getting back into reading books. And then I asked my dad, okay, I've read this book. What book should I read next? And he gave me Jim Rohn's CDs.
Awesome.
And my dad was into that. And it was a Take Charge of Your Life seminar. It was like a weekend seminar that he did. He literally did, it felt like he did that seminar without any notes. And I was just amazed at his like speaking ability, his teaching ability, and just how much I learned from him that first time. It was a breath of fresh air. And it was kind of like, at that time, my God. Because, and I just used that book as like my life Bible, but pretty much. I was like, this is what I'm going to soak up and learn. And I've always had that thirst for when I have decided to learn something, that I always get pretty obsessed about things. And I think I listened to that audio CD in my car, which was like lots of changeable CDs, 5 or 6 different CDs. I went through them all 1,000 times, probably to date. And I like reprogrammed my whole brain through doing that. And I still listen to it to this day, 12 years later maybe. And it changed everything, that CD for me. Like Take Charge of Your Life, I recommend it to anyone listening. And that it was a sentence that Jim Rohn said in that, which was, it really hit me because of that limiting and damaging belief that I had of feeling stupid. and it was gather it all up because there's nothing worse than being stupid. But you know what's worse than being stupid is being broken stupid. But you know what's worse than being broken stupid is being sick, broke, ugly, and stupid, or something like that. And the crowd were laughing. It's quite harsh, sort of comedian, sort of. He was being sort of comedic when he was doing it and being humorous. But it kind of hurt me, and probably hurt other people. Like maybe like it was maybe meant to. That's his teaching style. Was it was kind of to hit you with like a ton of bricks or a slap across the face.
Yeah.
And I felt almost all of them at the time. I was like, I felt broke. I felt kind of sick because my health probably wasn't that good back then, if I think about it. And I felt stupid. And I was like, yeah, I feel like that. Yeah, I feel like that. Yeah, I feel like that. And then I was just like, you know what? I'm going to take his advice and gather it all up. AKA, what he meant by gathering it all up was read books, gather knowledge, gather the knowledge. And my dad always said to me that knowledge is power. And something just changed, like my paradigm. I've had a paradigm shift at that time, and it changed everything. That sentence is like this. I remember it's the starting point of it all, but it came from a lot of pain. So the pain is what drove me the most at the beginning.
I think that's the case for most people, whether you're aware of it or not. Like even just like hearing your story from like start to beginning, it's and something that I've become obsessed with is like those mini realizations, those mini things that just like are hitting you, that it's the message that you need at that time, or that little bit of knowledge that once you know it or hear it or learn it, it just changes you, changes the way you think. One of my favorite quotes is Ralph Waldo Emerson. He says, "A mind once stretched by a new idea never returns to its original dimensions." And it's very similar to what you're saying. Like you read that book, you now have all of what that book says. You know, you didn't know that before, and kind of going on that. And that's kind of what personal development is to me. Is like being curious and interested in learning more. And I think people that end up in personal development, like you said, and you're kind of a perfect example. It's like two ways. Like it's already in your life. Like you have some sort of mentor or somebody that is kind of sharing that wisdom with you, or kind of leaving clues or leaving little tracks where you can follow along. But still, it's still your journey. It's still things that you have to overcome.
Yeah, and it's a choice. At that time, that book was always in arm's reach of my life. But I never reached for it. I never asked my dad for it. So there's got to be a desire or pain or desire that makes you actually do something. Like I was explaining the idea that, or a quote that don't cast pearls among swine, or another way of putting it is when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. And that I was a student that was ready at that time, because I decided not to be a student after college and school. What it did to me, it made me decide I'm never learning again. I'm never learning again. Almost that was like what I got from coming out of school. So something changed in me to go, I need to learn so much more. And then I heard that quote about gathering it all up, knowledge, that was painful to me, and the pain was the drive.
Why do you think school can be such a big pain point for most people? Because I felt the same way, in the sense that I think public education or formal education, you know, Jim Rohn, big fan, like formal education makes you a living, self-education makes you a fortune. Why does formal education kind of ruin most people's relationship with learning? Like, why do you think that's a big pain point? It's similar to the Albert Einstein quote that you said. Like, what is it about school that is kind of doing that to us, that kind of maybe it's necessary for us to kind of wake up and realize things? Or why hasn't it changed? Like, what do you think about kind of learning in school?
So I heard Robert Kiyosaki put it quite perfectly, and that was that school, or the current education system, is a antiquated system that is teaching you, like, people in a way that doesn't suit them. It's an old way that was important. It was important a long time ago. It's not evolved through our how like through people's learning disabilities or different ways of learning. And like I've heard people in the dyslexic world call it, instead of learning disability, is learning differences. And that's what it is. Like people have their brains are different, and they're taking this one way that works for maybe 60%, and saying this is school, this is the what would you call it, fixed and static way to learn from these textbooks and memorization. So dyslexia is the reason that dyslexic find school hard. This is just from my perspective, and maybe other people with ADHD, is because the cerebellum, which is a bit of the back of the brain, which is linked to the subconscious mind, the cerebellum part of the brain is the memory part of the brain, and it's essentially damaged from birth. So it's a real thing. Dyslexia is a real thing. So it is a disability in a sense. But what it becomes is, like, for me now, I see it as my superpower, because that bit of the brain's almost switched off. It empowers all the other parts of the brain. So also when someone goes blind, their hearing gets better. Or someone's hearing gets damaged, and they can see better or feel or touch better. And it empowers other parts of the body to work better and more creatively. So I looked at it as a negative thing, but then I seen it as a creation of who I am and my destiny. So the reason I think school does that to a lot of people, not everyone, because I've seen a lot of people thrive through school, go to uni, get good jobs, as I was like kind of come out of school like, what the hell did I do now? Like, that was a terrible experience. I went to college not really knowing what I want to do, and everyone seemed to know their career path. So I wouldn't say school is broken completely. It just didn't work for someone like me and a few other people who got taken out to learn and support class and things like that. So it's just not, for people like me, it wasn't very good for your own self-confidence and being taken out of school. Like, you're different from this other 70% who don't need that, probably even 90%. They don't need that, but you're getting taken out of the class. You're kind of labelled as stupid. Back when I was at school, it felt like I was labelled as stupid and needed extra support, and that just wasn't good for my upbringing and confidence building. That going into my mind for as I grew up. So I think it's just like that. Back to that Einstein quote that a fish is good at swimming and a monkey's good at climbing trees, and the fish should be in the sea and the monkey should be on trees, that kind of thing. And exactly. A dyslexic person should be CEOs. Like, they should be doing things that are involved with creativity, art, bits that don't remember. It's not about memory and memorization and what school forces you to do, like exams. If you can memorize everything from that textbook and memorize it and then go to an exam and tick all the boxes, that means you're smart. But I've learned a different way of what it actually means to be smart, and it's being able to go into the real world and work with people and create things. And there's different ways, there's different definitions of what smart is, and school has this old way of describing what makes you smart and what makes you dumb.
Exactly. I think exactly that. It's kind of, it's like a self-esteem, a confidence thing, where you're told that even in school, like, you're not allowed to make mistakes. You know, that's not a good thing.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
If you make a mistake on the test, like, that's not good. Whereas in real life, you have to make mistakes.
Yeah,
you have to fail faster, and that's what leads you to success. All the successful people, in whatever way you define success, they have made so many mistakes and they've learned to bounce back. Whereas for me, like, my school experience was very positive. I really enjoyed school. I did well in school. But when I would make a mistake, it was the end of the world. It was bad. So now, on the outside, I'm terrified to make mistakes.
Yeah.
You're scared to take risks. You're scared to fail. When really that's the recipe to success. Yeah. Something that school has really, like, shown me, and it's exactly what you said afterwards. Like, as soon as you leave school, it's kind of like a wake-up call. Like, hold on, what was that? And like, now you're in the real world, and it's just completely different, the way you learn and the way that you approach life. And one of my mentors I really like, Eckhart Tolle, reading his book and just kind of consuming his content, he says the suffering kind of brings about awakening. So
Mm-hmm.
like school, I think, is a pain point for many people, that once they leave school, it's kind of like, okay, now what? Like, how, what do I do next? Like, what did I really learn, and how was that kind of useful to like
Yeah.
what I'm doing now in my life? And so, I know books came up to you, and you know, you had your dad there, but how do you take that kind of pain and like actually create a desire to do something? How did that pain point bring a desire to actually get you to take action? Like, for most people, reading is something that they don't do. So like, how do you really like get to the point where you're picking up that book, till you're finishing that book, till like you're actually trying to make a
Mm.
change? Like, what is it that kind of motivates you, that gives you that desire?
That's a great question. Don't think anyone's really actually asked me that question before, but
Nice.
essentially, like, to break down your question, what you're asking me is, how does someone become motivated to take action?
Mm-hmm.
And it comes in different ways. Like, go back to what I said before, is desire comes from pain or pleasure. Tony Robbins describes it that way, that desire comes to that desire, which makes people take action, comes from running away from pain or going towards pleasure. And that's the two. That's like psychology explained quite quickly. So again, I found I leveraged the pain to run away from pain. I don't know if that's advisable, because it's much more positive to create. Now I know a more positive way of doing things, but here's two ways of doing things. One way is, if you were like me, you had that experience at school, leverage that disenchanting past, and use it as your rocket fuel, because there's a lot of, like, everything's energy, and you agree with me on that, I know that. Everything's energy, so whether it's bad or it's good, it's all balances itself out. And through what's called alchemy, you can turn a negative into a positive. You can transmute negative energy or lead into gold. So you can do that with your energy as well. So whatever energy you're experiencing, and if it's a lot of energy, which mine's was, it was debilitating energy or really powerful positive energy. So I used it as a sort of rocket fuel. There was this energy, and I was like, what am I running away from? And it was the feeling of being stupid or inadequate or not good enough. And I was like, someone gave me, again, I did have to come across this tool, which is reading. My tool was reading, that someone presented to me, to change that. It was, if you don't want to be stupid, broke, sick and ugly anymore, then read books. Basically, that was his message, put simple. If you don't want to be all of that, then do this. And I was like, okay, Jim Ron, I'll do that. And then I just went boom, 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 and there's my home library now.
Wow.
I've read
That's
all
awesome.
of these, and I've started reading all of these, and audiobooks as well, like when I'm walking anywhere I go. So I just took that advice and listened to this audiobook over and over, and that has so many gems in that, like in terms of like I said, a Bible or a guidance for life, a mentor for life. And I can still go back to it today, even with reading all these books and practicing all this stuff, and still learn something, and still have something that I've not done on that book yet. And I've seen that book as a sort of checklist. So yeah, it was like, find something to run away from, or to drive you to move away from, that's too painful, it's too painful to live with anymore, and things have got to change. Use that as your drive to move you. Or if you don't have much pain and you just feel sort of like you're living a mediocre life and you're worried that time's just passing by, which I think is like where I got to once I figured all that out and I read loads of books. I lost a drive. It was weird. I lost this drive that I had originally. It was gone because I achieved what I wanted to achieve. I achieved feeling smart and no longer feeling stupid. I overcame that limiting belief, and I felt smart, and I learned a lot about myself, that actually all that was just limiting beliefs and wrong. what I thought about myself. So, and I started making money, and I started learning how to make money for myself as a self-employed business owner. And then I met my girlfriend, who's now my wife. I moved out with her. So I had like health, wealth. I didn't have wealth, but I had health. I had love. I had happiness, and I had my confidence. And one thing I didn't have at that time was maybe my spirituality. I hadn't really uh, embraced into that, and that just got me so far and got me away from like a really negative past. And then I was like, what next? So I kind of felt in that sort of middle zone where now I was kind of like complacent, and I had to drive me to the next level. What I did is I gave myself, again, energy or tension. I call it tension. I gave myself tension by creating accountability structures. There's this. Is it? Have I got the business card there? I've got a book club called Sunrise Book Club, and I created that at the time I'd finished. I'd finished sort of learning. It almost felt like I'd slowed down my learning every morning. And the long story short is, I um, I used things to drive me. I started doing more goal setting and setting goals for the future. And I learned things from my current business mentor and spiritual life mentor. And he taught me some processes about like visioning and visualizing what you want. I've got like a vision board in front of me over here. And I practice things like from The Secret, like law of attraction.
Yeah.
And things like that. So like getting really clear on your life's purpose is the opposite from this like negative energy. This positive energy is what you want to move towards. It's what you desire. So you're using pain or pleasure and things, and both of them are things you desire, and that's what makes you actually do something about it.
Yeah, and honestly, even hearing from your experience and just like relating it to like other mentors and other like people that I've learned from and studied from, it's so interesting how like you don't need to know the whole how. Like you're talking
Yeah,
about energy, it's like, you know, the famous quote, Tony Robbins, you know, where your focus goes, energy flows. It depends on what you're paying attention to. So for example, like you're just going through and you have these pain points, you're kind of getting curious, you're kind of wondering, and then all of a sudden this book shows up, this audio
mm-hmm.
book shows up and changes your life. It's like you couldn't have planned that. But if you were in a state where you were still focusing on the pain and feeling down and feeling stupid, you could have easily written yourself off and said, well, I'm not smart enough to read those kind of books, or you know, I'd never finish that book. But the
Yeah,
fact that like what you're paying attention to in your life and what you feel energetically, like that book felt like the right thing. It felt like
yeah,
you were
yeah,
going to turn a negative into a positive, and
yeah,
then that book led you to the next thing and
yeah,
you know, the next opportunity, and then, you know, you met your wife, which, you know, you can't really plan or you know, like
no, yeah,
control. And these are just things that when you're in the right energy, in the right state, then like I said, law of attraction, those things start to find you. And
yeah,
so something that I really like that you talk about in terms of like energy and more like spirituality is like consciousness and
yeah,
self-awareness. What is self-awareness, or I know you like to use the term super consciousness. What is
yeah,
that to you, and like why is it so important in not just like business but also like in life and personal development?
yeah. Just before I answer the question, I just
Yep.
reading a comment here that came in.
Yep.
You ever wonder if dyslexia comes from how we are parented as a child?
Yeah, that's Frank. Hello,
Okay,
Frank.
and the one below that. So, like as a child of a single parent home and watching my little brother grow up, it has a different impact on males when they are absent that aspect of their nature.
Yeah, that was when
In,
you were talking about like your dyslexia growing up, and I noticed that's when he commented that.
okay,
And then you talking about just being like super masculine and never having
yeah,
that,
yeah,
like men don't talk about their feelings, or you know, they don't talk about things going on with them, and when you were speaking about that, so I think that's where,
okay,
I don't know if Frank is still here, but yeah, I assume that most males kind of agree with that. I hope that the narrative's kind of changing with that, and I think more people are being more open
yeah,
about discussing their feelings. I know
yeah,
like back then when we were younger, like it wasn't. like that at all.
Yeah. Sorry, could you repeat the question, because that distracted me, that there was a comment up on my screen while you were asking me a question.
Yeah, just like more so talking about like consciousness or super consciousness
Oh
or
yeah,
self-awareness. I totally believe in that, and that's something that I realize is so important that I don't think most people are aware of, even like aware of themselves. So what is that to you, and why is it so important, not just in
yeah,
business but also life?
yeah. So super consciousness to me, one of my mentoring students or clients that I've been coaching on this stuff is essentially like what life coaches can do. They can go into your unconscious mind and show you what happened in your childhood and how it's affecting you today, and how you're having gone through patterns. So it's essentially having a an understanding of psychology, and then it's beyond psychology. It also looks at like your soul and the spiritual dimension of the world. So what I believe is there's a spiritual dimension and there's a physical world, which we're in. We're touching. I can touch my phone in, and my body's standing on a floor upstairs in a house, and that's the physical dimension. And the spiritual dimension is where I'm kind of talking from. Like there's this memory that's not stored like a file in a filing cabinet. It's coming from the universe. Yeah. And like people talk about God. I sometimes just use God or universal intelligence. All means the same thing to me.
Yeah.
And then inner wisdom. So like, where does that come from? It comes from God. It comes from universal intelligence, and it comes from like the subconscious mind can tap into that. And sometimes when we have complete genius moments, we don't actually know where it comes from. We get these insights, or we have these visions of the future of our life. They're just like, it's like God speaking to us. It's like the universe speaking to us, or nature speaking to us and telling us what we should do. There's like this, what my spiritual coach taught me at a time I was experiencing anxiety for the first time in my life at about age 24. And again, I felt like a confident person at this point because I was going through all my own personal development. But I learned it was just by spending a lot of time alone and working hard. I had not been going outdoors a lot, but it was also because of it being out of alignment. Again, not talking through and exploring self-examination of myself and who I really am, and not tapping into that full, like, you've got your shadow self, or the dark side, and that's like sort of 20% of you, which for most men, it could be like their feminine side that they don't really let out, they suppress. So all this stuff is like Carl Jung, as a psychologist, who talks a lot about the unconscious mind, and it was really deep into what I learned about the unconscious mind and the ego, which ultimately the ego is just trying to protect us.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's trying to protect us from death. It's trying to keep us alive, yeah. And it tries to control the outcome almost through a logical way. It's like, if you walk off a cliff, you'll die. If you go near a cliff, that's dangerous and you might die, so stay away from the cliff. So it actually keeps you in your comfort zone. We talk about, people in personal development talk a lot about comfort zones, and it is essentially the ego is just keeping us in our comfort zone as much as it can. And it has more power over anything until you start learning about this other dimension, which is your being able to tap into your life's purpose, your soul's life purpose. And Bernie, going back to that story about when I was experiencing anxiety, it was because I was so anchored in sort of the physical world and about reading knowledge, and I was really becoming really wise through reading and learning, and I was quite obsessed. Again, I get obsessed with things, in a sometimes a very positive way, and sometimes destructive. But it got too far basically, and I needed to kind of start trusting my intuition again. I was bringing a notepad. I still do it, but because of like maybe my old beliefs about dyslexia and not having good memory, I always brought a notepad with me. And one day I brought a notepad and I was talking to her, and she was teaching me stuff. I was writing it all down. She was kind of like, "Why are you writing that down. She was like, trust your intuition, and she was very much about intuition. And then she talked about this thing like, is it Oz, Wizard of Oz, the yellow brick road?
Yep. Yep.
Um, so she talked about the follow your yellow brick road, and she used that as a analogy of like your life's purpose. So being on that path means that you're aligned with your life's purpose. And when you get out of alignment, you're kind of going off of that, and you're being distracted by things that are not aligning with who you truly are. And it's about getting back on that road, which is at the end of it, in a sense, where you what you were born to do, and getting back aligned with that, and clearing the noise, like clearing these limiting beliefs I had, peeling off the layers, so that all that's left. I have a visual idea of what we're actually doing is, imagine your brain, and that's your like yourself, your true soul's life purpose, and yourself, who you truly are. And then there's I always see this visual aspect of it, which is like moss growing on the self. And when you're doing this unconscious work and looking at your limiting beliefs and all these different attachments onto this identity you've created for yourself, you start peeling off these layers, and the more you peel off, like it's kind of like scraping moss off of like a roof of which there's just a nice beautiful roof underneath. And I see it sort of on the brain, and people are just clearing that off, and once all that's left is yourself after you've done enough of that. And that's when you start to shine, and that's when like your true self comes through. There's nothing holding you back anymore. So that's what super consciousness is to me. It kind of looks like courage, but it's not. Courage is overcoming the ego, and it does take courage almost every day to overcome the ego, because the ego is so scared and tries to stay in its comfort zone. And we have to put ourselves into the unknown to experience our true self, our genius, and it's courageous to follow your purpose, what you know is your true life purpose, because it goes against maybe what you've been indoctrinated into thinking who you might be. Exactly. And there's a big difference. It's different from feelings. Like following your genius or your purpose is different from following your feelings. The ego is locked in thoughts and feelings. The genius is more like it comes from the heart, and from intuition, which is a very different feeling from feelings and thoughts.
Yeah, I really like that analogy that you used too, in terms of like the moth. One analogy that really stuck with me, I like analogies. I think it helps people, make sense of things, is like if you're looking at a mirror and that mirror has a layer of dust on it, and slowly you just start to wipe away the dust, and then that reveals kind of what you're looking in the mirror, which is your true self. Eventually you get to that point. Yeah. Something that like I always struggled with until I didn't was the idea of like, how do you know? Like you're talking about life purpose, and it's your intuition voice versus your ego voice. I think most people throughout their whole lives are listening a lot to their ego voice, and they think that their ego voice is them. And when you slowly start to develop some sort of self-awareness, you can start hearing your intuition a little more. And when you start paying attention to that, for me personally, just starting to be more aware, like more present in my day, more present in myself, more conscious in the type of thoughts that I'm paying attention to. So not giving so much power to the thoughts that are telling me that, I'm not good enough, or I'll never figure it out, or I don't know what I'm doing, or whatever. And starting to pay more attention to just like possibility and like the unknown. Let's see what happens. How do you, when you find your life purpose, like how do you know? Like how do you know that that's what you were meant to do? Like how does that feel? Or how does that kind of like come about?
Yeah, it's a really good question as well. I think it's the truth is, which I learned from Ryan Pinnock, who's been my mentor on this stuff. He talked about how you never really know. Like you'll never have real solid clarity, because your purpose is kind of in the unknown. Like I said earlier, it's always like magic happens in the unknown, and it's kind of like the best way to put it is being present, being without those thoughts and feelings, is you're now kind of in the unknown because you're now exploring. It's essentially exploration, and it's like traveling without knowing where the next destination is. That's what it feels like. It's kind of like traveling with a rucksack, or even without a rucksack. It's probably even more like that with your own body and like one change of clothes, and you're just walking into the world anywhere, and you're just hoping you'll get from like kind of hitchhiking from A to B safely. And that's what it feels like when you're following your life's purpose. And it comes from, again, like a prayer, a God, like God talking to you, inner wisdom, or
Something
the
non-physical.
universe or nature speaking to you. Non-physical. And it's like, I don't really believe as much about like signs on the road, but I get signs in my thoughts, in my ideas. I don't call them thoughts though, because they get thoughts are from the ego. Ideas, insights, intuitions. That's the kind of like where it comes from. It's very different from feeling, because feeling's like trapped in emotion, and the emotional brain is the ego. So it's being able to, like, I've spent a lot of time. It takes a while to really get deep and understand the difference between emotions and feelings and thoughts, and these insights and from your vision, from your purpose. Okay. So you learn to differentiate the two, and then that's how you know. And when bad stuff happens to you, like you break your arm, when you get in a car crash, when you maybe keep attracting the wrong partner, or you buy a house and the whole house falls apart, something like that, it means that you've kind of been acting unconsciously, which is your ego. So it's when you know that you're aligned with your purpose, and your life's purpose, it's when things flow, as you said, when things just flow naturally. It's just right. You know it is. Yeah. You don't know why fully, but you had this little idea or whisper, and you went and did it, and the things worked out quite well.
Yeah, exactly. That's similar to like how I feel in my experience. At first, like when you're lost and confused and you don't know, it's kind of like you're searching for like, how do I know? How do I figure it out? And then you get this hunch or insight or some sort of like intuition, some sort of like even like a synchronicity, some sort of coincidence that makes you feel like, okay, wait, like, yes, now I know, like, I'm on my right path. Like
synchronicity is a great word as well. Exactly. That really defines it when you get that. And just for people who might not understand what synchronicity is, because I didn't one day only a couple of years ago. Synchronicity is like, for example, me and my friend talk about synchronicity a lot. I go to the gym, he goes to the gym at the same time. I go for a walk, he goes for a walk at the same time. That's the kind of like idea what I mean when I talk about synchronicity, is when like I want to meet him, but we're both busy in our life because we're both very aligned with our purpose, but we end up meeting while doing the thing we wanted to do anyway. So it's like, go for what you want, and at least like magic happens for you. So like it's when you take action though, like intuition's good, but intuition plus action leads to magic happening and being gifted by you get these little gifts along the road for your courage and for just going and doing it.
Yeah, totally. I agree with that as well. Like there's a quote, knowledge is power, which you mentioned earlier. Jim Quick says that like knowledge is not power, it's potential power. It's only power when you use it and apply it. When you start to learn things and you just follow that like little guidance, that little intuition, that little voice telling you like go that way or like try that thing or read that book, that's when the magic happens. I think it's interesting though, like you said, like you'll never fully know, like you won't know, and that's an idea that I've been like thinking about recently in the sense that like you'll never arrive, like whatever your purpose is or whatever it is, like it's forever evolving. Like your life journey is the becoming. Like you don't just ever become and then that's it. Similar to how you said like at first you didn't feel smart or confident or you kind of were doubting yourself, and then all of a sudden you started the business, you started making money, and you started you know, feeling confident and smart, and then you kind of hit like a plateau, like a lag, where you're like, wait, no, I need to keep going. I
Yeah.
think that happens like throughout your life. Like
Yeah,
you
it does.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, you think you know, and you get that, and then all of a sudden you start
Yeah.
doing that for a while, and then it's like,
Yeah.
wait,
Yeah.
and
You
that's
get
just like a
lost
push.
again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
You get distracted, you
Lost
get
in time.
lost, and you get
Yeah,
complacent. And it's, yeah, the clarity is never there 100% of the time. Even for me, and I've learned all this stuff, even from my mentor who taught me all this stuff,
yeah.
I've watched him get lost and
Mhm.
lose his confidence. But now I can see him bouncing back because he knows these tools that he's taught me, and I can bounce back very quickly now. So there is a way to tap into your genius on tap versus stumbling from wall to wall and getting by it through life and fluking some genius moments.
Mhm.
Whereas now I know how to be a genius most of the time rather than unconscious most of the time.
Yeah.
And Joe Dispenza, Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about
Love him.
the subconscious mind. Yeah. And he says that I think 80, by the time someone's 30 or 35,
Yeah.
their brain is basically cemented and they repeat the same daily actions and thoughts, actions, attitudes. 80% of their day is just the same thoughts, attitude, action
Mhm.
on repeat every day.
Mhm.
Every day. So there's like this 20% that's actually conscious. The
Yeah.
rest of the 80% is completely unconscious doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So, but there is a way out of that, obviously. There's
Right.
ways to get into the programming and change it.
And that's self-awareness, right? And like that's
Yeah,
why it's so important to use your awareness to tap into those unconscious habits. It's like
yeah,
you mentioned Carl Jung before. One of my favorite quotes, and one of like the posts that people love the most on my page that I posted, is that until you make the unconscious conscious, it'll direct your life, and you'll call it fate. Like
yeah.
you,
That's so
that
true.
that's just
Yeah,
what it is. Like, oh, too bad, that's just how it is. When
yeah,
in reality, when you tap into that awareness, you realize that you get the choice. You get to
yeah,
choose, and you get to actually create instead of just consuming and thinking that's just the way it is. When you
yeah,
consciously interject some sort of thought or intuition, or well, I
yeah,
guess thought, which then leads to an intuition, that's when you start feeling like positive momentum in your life, and you feel
yeah,
like you
yeah,
can start to deal with some of the things that maybe you were hiding, and then just kind of switch it from negative to positive, like low vibe to
yeah,
high vibe, more
yeah,
energy, and feel good and better about your life path.
yeah. And it's really important to know the tools. And I learned that from my mentor, and that's really helped me. So that the knowledge is really important to start with, because the
Yeah.
knowledge starts the process of the like changing and understanding how all these things are actually happening. So action without some prior knowledge is like you can become just a busy fool making lots of mistakes.
Yeah.
Whereas I've learned a way where I can be more strategic and have these tools that I carry with me as I go into the unknown. And that's been very helpful in allowing me to see that I'm being unconscious and neutralize my ego quickly and then do things from a more present zone. And just all these tools I can kind of have in my rucksack, I can use them all. So it is important to equip yourself with tools as you go out into the unknown, because without them, you just kind of get squashed by the world.
Exactly.
So yeah, I got squashed a bunch of times until I learned tools as I went.
Exactly. And that's necessary. It's the journey to success, or to wherever you want to be. So
Yeah.
last question, in terms of just, in light of it being January and 2022, what's something that you think you would recommend to people? Like you said, you got a bunch of tools in your rucksack. What's a tool that would help people be more conscious, less ego-minded, like monkey brain, where you're kind of down and like in your negative thoughts? How do you pay more attention to the good, and allow that kind of intuition and the super consciousness to kind of flow through you? What's a tool that somebody can use?
Yeah, so I've got 3 tools that I can think of, and I've heard Will Smith do a talk on this. Actually, he talked about the secret to life is running and reading, and
Yeah, I saw that too.
yeah, and what I think he means when he talks about running, he talks about like is overcoming yourself, like fighting that ego and getting yourself to continue running anyway. Yeah. When the monkey brain kicks in and says, "Ben, your lungs are going to blow up," but you keep going anyway because it's not true. Because as David Goggins talks about, when you hit your limit, you've actually got another 60% to go, and he calls it the 40% rule. So when you're like at your strength on the bench press, which I do quite a lot, I know that I'm not hit my limit. I've got much more to go. And Jim Rohn talks about a similar thing, that like how tall will a tree grow? And do you know the answer?
No limit.
Yeah, it's basically
To the sun.
a tree will grow as tall as it possibly can, and that was such a like interesting way of putting it, because like then we've got the human condition, which is we limit ourselves for some reason. Why don't we grow as tall as we possibly can, or expand, use all we possibly can of our brain, 100% of our brain, and beyond that, like don't limit what we think the brain can do, because the brain can do so much more than we think, or the body and the brain can do so much more, especially if you tap into that spiritual aspect of ourselves. So reading is to get the tools, as I explained earlier. The tools and resources, just constantly going back, reflecting. So here's the 3 tools: running, reading, reflecting, and reflecting from a present zone. So like meditation. And these are things that I use that have really benefited my life. Is running, because I'm fighting my ego and I'm challenging myself every day, and I'm getting present, and it's meditative as well. Bruce Lee used running as meditation. And then reading, it gives you the tools to combat the world and to learn before you just do, and it gives you some of that in your rucksack as you go into the unknown. And then the reflection is just learn from your experiences and the mistakes and draw the good from it. And before that, make sure you do some meditation, which is essentially getting yourself present, and getting present is essentially clearing your thoughts and emotions temporarily. So there's nothingness, stillness, and you can hear the ocean rather than cars, and like just being in nature and getting out and being like the running does that as well. So these 3 tools are amazing for just people in general for your life.
I love that. Like you said, like I admire runners. Like a runner's mind is tough. Like you overcome so much on your run. You overcome yourself so much, and it's something that like you said, you're pushing to your limits, which isn't actually your limit. You could definitely keep going. It's overcoming that thought of being like, no, I want to stop. No, keep going. And that's kind of what life is like, like keep going, like don't stop. You have
exactly.
And then reading, of course, like books, so much wisdom. You don't even know what you don't know, and until you read that book, how could you know? So and then obviously reflection. Meditation is the one tool that I would recommend to everyone. I think everyone, I think it should be taught in schools. I think everyone should start to learn how to sit quietly and just see, just observe what comes up, because then that allows you to kind of see your negative unconscious thoughts that are directing your life, and then you can consciously choose ones that are making you feel better and kind of guide you the way. Ben, that was so awesome. I love talking to you. I swear we could talk forever. I swear we're going to have to do this again probably at some point. It seems like people in the comments loved it too, which is awesome. But before we go, is there anything that maybe if people want to learn more from you or kind of and kind of follow along with you, I highly recommend following Ben. Ben Laing 2 is your handle. Is there somewhere that you'd like to direct people to kind of learn more?
Go to my Facebook group if you're on Facebook, Ben's Business Book Club. It's a community of avid readers and learners. There's about 1,700 people in there. And I also have a group called Ben's Business and Mindset Mentoring. It's on Facebook as well, a group where I just give some free, more in-depth live videos and knowledge where I go deeper than I can go on Instagram. But yeah, my stories, I post, like, I literally document my life. Document, don't create. On Instagram. So yeah, just stay on Instagram and check my story every day. And I'm always like reading, running, reflecting. So when I'm reflecting on video. It's just to share the wisdom that I learned in that day with the world.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so this will become a podcast, so I'll make sure that I get your links, and that way I can share them with people. But for now, follow Ben. Thank you, Ben, for chatting with me. I loved it. This was so long overdue. I knew the conversation was going to be amazing. You had so much value on your page, and I just knew this conversation was going to be the same. So thanks for chatting with me. all the best for 2022. Excited to see what you come up
Same
with.
to you. Yeah.
And yeah, let's stay in touch.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Take care. See you
Cheers.
later.
Bye.
Cheers.